Hello and welcome to the Boag World Show, the longest running web design podcast where we talk about user experience design, conversion, optimization and working with the web. On this month's show, we're going to discuss how brand identities are commonly undermining usability, accessibility and readability, because I'm a grumpy old man, as well as why top task analysis is one of my favourite research tools. My name is Paul Boag. Joining me as always is Marcus, newly married Lillington. Hello Marcus, how you doing?
Very well. Look at me, I'm all tanned and
You
underneath
are.
as well.
Ooh.
Just before we go into the important stuff of weddings and holidays and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
Today's show, I think, has been the first time that all of the content I'm actually interested in.
That's how many years have we been doing this? I think we've been doing this podcast since 2005.
I'm joking,
so
obviously, or I have something to say on that kind of stuff. But yes, you were there, Paul.
I was.
I
ate your food and I drank your drinks. It was very nice.
It was.
And what was really disturbing to me, I said it to you at the day, but you were so out of it that you were. I don't think you took it in. I cannot believe that is the first time I've ever seen you perform live.
I know.
It's
well, I don't do it
ridiculous.
very often these days, but yes, there was a few songs done.
You do. I know you don't normally sing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I normally sing backing vocals.
Yeah, okay. I think you're a much better singer than you think. I can't believe I'm giving you compliments. This is not natural. But no, I thought you were really good.
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated.
Can I say something? I actually think you were better than the lead singer in your current group. Don't tell him that.
Phil. I wouldn't worry about it. Phil is... The chances of Phil ever listening to this...
Yeah, are like zero. I figured I was pretty safe.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to get pregnant would be more likely.
Although the other band that played were remarkably good, much better than you lot were. So
they were superb. I mean, little plug for them. If anyone's in the south of England and wants a band for a function, they're called the Lettuce Heads. They've been around for years and they are top level professional.
They really were.
Absolutely wonderful. And I used to sing Ian, the lead singer, who still looks, I mean, up close he doesn't, neither do I suppose. But he looks and kind of acts like he's in his 30s. He's a presence on the stage. He raps and all this kind of thing. He was 60 last week, so he's just beat me to 60. But yeah, we both used to play. He was the backing vocalist in the Breathe days, in the Breathe band that went out live. Dave was the lead singer, and Ian was one of the backing vocalists. So that was very nearly 40 years ago.
God,
as I said in my speech, when we were both 5 years old.
Yes, exactly. So I know you've told me this, but where did you go on honeymoon?
We went to Italy. We went to Sorrento, and we went to a town on the Amalfi Coast called Maori.
Very nice.
It
you looked like you had a really good time.
It was stunning, yes, absolutely amazing. It was very, very hot and very, very humid as well, which I wasn't expecting. It's sort of like, it's like really sticky, but you do have the bonus of being able to just wander into a swimming pool whenever you feel like it, or your air-conditioned room.
Yes, it's very different to being hot and sticky in the UK when you've got work to do.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, we did lots of cool things as well. We didn't just laze about. We did a bit of lazing about. We're both major foodies and winies, so couldn't want for a better place really than sort of southern Italy for that. But we did. We went on a boat trip around Capri. We walked for miles up ridiculously steep stairs, and the poor old man, I had to keep stopping.
Yeah.
But the views when you got up there were fantastic. So yeah, we had a brilliant time. And
good.
And I don't really want to do it anymore. I don't want to come back and do work anymore.
No. Well, you said but you said you came back with that first day of school feeling, which I immediately misread. Because you meant that as a good thing. Well, my first days back at school were always awful. I hated going back to school, but you're obviously more pro than me.
Well, it was always a case of, what's changed? Who are these people I haven't seen for a while? Is there anything interesting? Oh, this is different, which lasts about a day and a half.
Right, okay. So you're past that feeling at the moment and back to the, I don't want to be doing this.
God. Yeah.
Well, dear listener, you now know that Marcus doesn't want to be here and has no interest in this podcast whatsoever and wants to go back to Italy. So,
well, who wouldn't?
Who can blame him?
I was going to say, you would be the same. I believe you shouted on, as in you wrote it in capitals, I think, I want to retire on Slack the other day.
That doesn't sound like
might have been even stronger than that. It might have been... There might have been swearing or something. Anyway.
Probably. Yeah, yes. That does sound very much like me. But I don't feel like that about this podcast. This is obviously the highlight of my month.
Quite, yes. I'm sorry for me going away on holidays meant that it's you've had to wait a little longer.
And you screwed up the next one as well. That's got to be recorded.
Did make me laugh. I've got one day off in August and it's the same
and
day.
It happened to be the day we were recording. Unbelievable. Anyway, let's talk about some interesting stuff. I've got a thing. I've made a thing, Marcus. I'm very proud of myself.
Claude's made a thing.
What, Claude? Shut up. Right? No, that counts these days. I vibe coded. That makes me young and trendy, right. or a tech bro, one or the other.
Depends what it is. What have you done?
Well, you see, yeah. So, I am a fan of a technique called top task analysis.
As right? Am I.
Oh, you are?
Very
are you?
Much so, yes.
Okay.
I said
that's really good.
Every element of the content of this show, I actually.
Well, I didn't know you meant this bit because I didn't know that you were a top task. Right. So for those who don't know, top task analysis is a technique created by a guy called Jerry McGovern, and it basically. It's a bit like a survey. So imagine you're sending a survey out and you say to people, what do you want this app, this website, this whatever to do, right? You know, what questions do you want answered? What tasks do you want to complete, etc., etc. The problem you're going to get back is that they're going to list 100,000 different things that would be nice to have, right? But not all of those things are going to be equal. So, for example, you might want to be, let's imagine you were building a SaaS app that was, I don't know, an email marketing tool for sending out bulk emails. One of the things that people might want to do is to tag people, right, that are subscribed via your system. But that's not going to be as important as the ability to send an email, right? Not all tasks are equal, but in a normal survey, you don't really get that. But you do with the top task analysis. And this is really, really important. And the example that Jerry McGovern always used to give was when he worked with Microsoft, the Microsoft Office team, that they had this knowledge base that answered every conceivable question anybody might have about using the Microsoft Office suite. And they had a really low satisfaction rating that they tracked on this knowledge base. And so they doubled down and they answered even more questions and went to even more detail. And their satisfaction rating went down even further. And Jerry came in and said, well, the problem is that people can't find that 80% of people want to find 20% of the things on that knowledge base, and those top tasks are buried because of all of these small tasks that you're answering. So that's where top task analysis was born, and I use it all the time for information architecture, for dashboards, for building out functionality within SaaS apps, all of that kind of stuff. But it's a bloody pain in the arse to do, right? Because you have to do it in multiple rounds. First of all, you have to go and gather all of the tasks that somebody might want to do. So you end up with a big old list of tasks. And then you have to get people to vote on those tasks and in terms of which ones are most important to them.
Yes.
So I got fed up with doing it. And of course, me being the lazy bugger that I am is always looking for a quick way to solve the problem. So I built an app. And I'm really chuffed with it. So essentially what happens is you kind of seed it with an initial list of tasks someone might need to do. And I typically either just ask AI to come up with a load of those, or I will maybe ask the customer support team.
I asked the client.
Yeah, well, I'd ask the client as well. Yes, obviously, but internal stakeholders, and so you end up with an initial list. But the great thing is with this app is that you don't need to get that list perfect, right? because what my app does is it enables people as they go in and they're presented with this very long, intimidating list of tasks, okay? They can search on the thing that they want, right? And cool. If it's there, they could just select it and go, yeah, I want that thing. If it's not there, they can just add their own suggestion, and then that gets added to the list that everybody else sees as well. So it grew, and I've even added in profanity filters, so that if they decide to write sweary things in, it gets picked up. And also you can see it in the back end and remove stuff that way. So basically, users can only select 5 tasks, that the 5 most important to them. Then they're taken to a second screen where they then can sort them in the order that matters to them most, all in one go. Yeah. And then you've got this interface in the back end that allows you to see everything and manage stuff and go in and merge things where people have said the same thing but in slightly different ways. You can merge them together, all of that good stuff. And because I am so old, and I remember the good old days where we used to give away what we learnt and what we did for free, I'm just making it free. I'm not, I went, oh, should I monetize this? Should I charge people for it? And then I thought, I can't be asked. So there will be a link in the show notes where you can just go and try this out for free. I've only made it free for people that are signed up to my newsletter, but if you're not, just go through the process of using the app, and it'll ask you if you want to sign up, and then you can go and use it as much or as little as you want. But have a play with it.
I'll have a play with that, Paul. I mean, I was thinking of an example. Pretty much every survey we do, you ask which of these following descriptions best describes you, and then you go in to do a top task analysis. So then you get the top task analysis by user type. Really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's in there. You can do that.
And one of we kind of kicked this a long time ago. We did a website for Southampton General Hospital or University Hospital Southampton or whatever they're called. And I've just literally gone and checked to see if it's still there. If you go to University Southampton Hospitals Trust, you'll see there's eight links at the top of the page under the main nav. They are the top 8 top tasks for, I think, inpatients and outpatients. We didn't include staff and all that kind of thing. So they're for their 2 most important groups, and they're still there 8 years later. So it's a fine thing to do. Sorry.
Yeah, and you can't do this with the normal survey tool, unfortunately, because that's I always just kind of bodged it with a survey tool. But the trouble with a survey tool is you can't add new tasks on the fly that everybody else sees. You can't easily then get people to select some tasks that they then have to order, and it was all just a bit messy. So it was easier just to build something. So you can go and play with it to your heart's content at toptasks.boagworld.com. And yeah, knock yourself out, because I'm very proud of it. And if you seriously, and this goes for you as well, Marcus, if you have feedback or if there's anything you want changing on it, do let me know, Paul at boagworld.com. I nearly forgot my own email address. And just let me know, and I'll add it in, because it's it's a fairly straightforward thing.
There was another thing about that. The reason why I wanted to mention the hospital one is we did it with clipboards and paper, pen, walking around in the cafe at the hospital and all this kind of thing. Yeah, in the olden days.
But that's a good way of doing it, I still think. But it's not always feasible, is it? No. Especially these days, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's that. I've also in the show notes, which will be at boag.world/037, I think we're on. There is also an article that I've written about top task analysis and a kind of step-by-step guide for using this app and that kind of stuff. So there'll be the actual app in there in the show notes, and there'll be this guide as well. I think the guide is actually linked to from the very first paragraph on the actual app as well, so you can check that out. Cool. I want to talk about that more because I was really excited by it. Because I could build a thing. I haven't been able to build a thing since about 2010, I don't think. It all got too sophisticated. Really good. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So the next bit is ranting time. I haven't done a good rant for a while, so I felt like it was time that we did a rant. Can we put the explicit tag on this? I am fed up with bloody brand guidelines, so I thought I'd talk about that a little bit, because it seems to come up a lot recently, and I don't understand why this has to be so complicated. And I've just had enough of being forced to obey brand guidelines that were really designed for a brochure, a business card, or some kind of presentation. It just pisses me off so much that I'm done with it. And especially these days when the web is the place where most people experience a brand, yet it still seems like it's treated as an afterthought, and most branding agencies seem to be print-led, and they mock up a website, which is puts the fear of God into me every time I hear that a branding agency is going to do that, because you know it's going to be a train wreck. And then even once that's done, you've then got the branding police that come in, the person that's made responsible for the brand, and they blindly protect all those brand assets, whether or not they result in an unreadable, inaccessible, inflexible, or badly optimized website. They don't care because it's in the brand guidelines. So, yes.
Yes, Paul, I agree entirely. And I think it's fair to say it's not the only thing we do. Obviously, we do a lot of development work as well, but we have sold ourselves as brand interpreters for digital for the last 15 years. And some of the things that we're going to come on to, I don't quite see eye to eye with you on, Paul, but basically, I completely agree that branding agencies, not all branding agencies, obviously, but there is a focus on the traditional side of branding, which tends to be around messaging and logos and really obvious kind of examples of a thing that is related to a brand, like a logo. But even logos are a classic example of your very fine, detailed, swirly square logo is probably not going to work online. But I'd also talking about logos, I've got to be a bit careful on this one. Somebody told me about this client, obviously not one of ours, who are related to who do stuff that's related to the blind. A new logo developed for a sub brand that basically fails all contrast guidelines, and it's like, oh, come on. And it's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. Yeah,
because don't get me wrong, I'm all for consistency, right? Yeah. But consistency of a poor experience isn't really much of an achievement, is it really? Yeah. And I really like your positioning there. You're not saying we're a branding agency. You're saying we can take an existing brand and adapt it to work in a digital environment. Yeah. And I think a lot of the time that's what's needed. Part of the reason why people are so rigid about their brand guidelines is because it took them so long to get the bloody things signed off. And, it costs so much to go through a redesign that they don't want to do that. And I can totally understand that. But that doesn't mean it can't be adapted to work better on the internet. Yeah. I mean, even if you just take into account the fact that a lot of brand guidelines give you Pantone numbers as the basis, and then they take the hex value straight off the Pantone number, not taking into account that you're suddenly going from something being printed on a page to projected in your eye with a monitor, and the color just interprets in a completely different way. So those two colors can look totally different to one another.
I have to tell you a horror story, Paul. Okay. When we have done over the years, let's say 2 or 3 or 4 proper branding projects where we've done logos and we've done print material and mugs and all that kind of thing. We were designing a PowerPoint presentation. And this is for, again, I'm going to be careful about what I say here, but the client, a lot of what they did, but this is over 10 years ago, a lot of what they did, they would print everything out So if client if client created a PowerPoint, they would print the PowerPoint out.
Of course.
Because that's what you did back in those days. Anyway, so, and of course, big wig client person is testing the new design we've put together and printing it out and holding it up to his screen and going, that's not the same. So anyway, we're trying to make the argument that, your printer will print this differently to the one down the hall, which they did eventually concede because they did that, but it's still not the same as the one on the screen. Anyway, so but the horror story is me and Lee basically testing, trying to find the closest match of the agreed colour for the brand to a printout across a bunch of printers, and I don't think we've done one since. It's just like,
I have just noticed that you actually have put in the show notes the name of the organisation that we shouldn't name. So I could drop you right in it at this moment because I know it.
But I edit this, so.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I think what the basis of my argument is that your brand should serve your organisation and its audience. So the moment its rules make the website harder to use, those rules need to be changed or at least adapted. And I'm not saying you just throw them out and start again, but that's got to be the basis.
But interpretation for whatever the brand is, being used on.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And the other thing that I think frustrates me a little bit about brand guidelines, at least not all branding agencies, I'm sure that some are better than this, but we do so much work as UXers, like understanding user needs, doing user testing, doing user research, but it still seems that most brand identities are pulled out of some designer's arse. And that they're not in any way validated. And that's one of the things that I love about the idea of having what I call digital first branding, right? Is you can actually test your brand with real users and do semantic differential surveys and get feedback and all of this kind of stuff. Before you sink a huge amount of money into rolling out your design across print, right? So you can get it right in digital first and experiment with it and then roll it out over print. But no, we don't want to do it that way. So let's lay out as clearly as I can why print first branding breaks online. Let's be specific about what the problems are. Problem number one is it presumes a fixed canvas when the internet is an unknown canvas. Websites might need to work across phones, laptops, large monitors, zoom levels, different orientations, all of that kind of stuff, which immediately causes problems when it comes to something that's been designed primarily for print. Number two, print resolutions become screen rendering. So all of these things that look great in print can look absolutely horrendous online, depending on the device. If you're using a Retina device, with like an iPhone or whatever, then great, wonderful. But if you're using a shitty monitor, you're gonna that detail in the logo, like Marcus said, is gonna break up. That delicate typeface is going to be difficult. Those complex images are going to collapse at smaller sizes and just not work. I've already ranted about number three, which is Pantone numbers do not work on the web, and the colour appears differently across devices. What actually happens, if you want to know the science of it, is when something is projected at you through a monitor, the colours tend to push to either end of the spectrum. So a light colour will become so light it's almost white, and a dark colour will become so dark it's almost black. Unless, of course, you have a beautifully calibrated monitor that only designers have. And then there's all the fact that a print design doesn't take into account the interactive nature of the web, that a website needs states and components and forms and navigation and error handling and focus indicators and calls to action. And most traditional guidelines do very little to say anything about that kind of stuff, or even worse, they have a limited number of colors and layouts and that kind of thing that actively stop you being able to design within those different interactive elements. And then, also with print material, at least to some extent, you have control over the environment. Not entirely, but what I mean by that is that when people are using a website, they may be viewing it outdoors in bright sunlight. They might have a poor connection. They might have tired eyes. They might be using assistive technology. They might be distracted by everything else that's going on their phone around them. It's not the same as reading a brochure, for example, or that kind of thing. And then also in print, everything is very controlled, and so you can create these really polished examples that look really good. But online, content is changing the whole of the time, right? So it's getting rewritten, pages grow, translations expand, if you've got multilingual versions, or as teams add new components in. The brand has to survive actual use, not merely how it looks in a nice launch deck. So,
actually, on that particular point, I think web designers can also fail on that point.
Oh, yeah, they can.
Because one tends to design using a set handful of content, and that all gets signed off and agreed, and then it has to be applied across a much wider, bucket of content, and then suddenly you see that it doesn't work here. Or then another classic one is like little bits of animation that always appear on a page load or something like that, which will look wonderful and look really impressive when you're showing it to the director of this or that. But when you're actually using the website and you're clicking from one page to another, you're going to smash the screen after 6 pages because it's doing this animation every time. So yes, I think yes, that is definitely the case here, but I think it's also the case for web designers as well.
So I thought I'd throw out a few common symptoms that I see. This is all just a structured rant, basically. I seem to keep coming across a lot of brand identities that have walls of capital letters, right? I don't mind using caps for, small things like tags or eyebrows, as they call them, which always strikes me as the most ridiculous name in the world to call anything. But anyway, that's fine. But when you start having blocks of text in all caps, which I've seen sometimes, that's painful. It just slows reading and is bad. And I don't know why branding agencies do that, because it's just as bad in print, but it seems to be a thing that
impact.
Impact. Yes, let's just shout everything. That's always the answer, isn't it? Then there's brand colours that use combinations that have got terrible contrast. That's probably the most common one that I think you see.
But on that one, I'm not sure. I think it's Lee. He's saving, keeping track of all of the products that he buys that have appalling contrast. So why is that not a thing? If on a shampoo bottle, why?
It is a thing. It is a thing. It's just nobody bloody enforces it.
Okay. Well, I guess that's my why is it not a thing? Because obviously it's a thing online. But
it's got legislation to support it and everything.
Yeah, because WCAG and whatever the one in America is called, it's not just online. So how do these companies get away with it? It's appalling.
I know.
Anyway.
Then there's decorative typefaces that become illegible on smaller screens. I see that one quite a lot. Logos that only work when they're enormous. Although, have you seen these responsive logos? Now that's clever. Where when it's bigger, it is more complicated. But as it goes down, the logo simplifies. And it's just dog's bollocks.
Yes, yes. Yes, I think we did do one. Or was that? Yeah, it was a fist with a sort of a circle around it with wording in that you just couldn't read until it got bigger, and then so then the wording appeared. Yes.
Yeah. See, that kind of thing's great. Yeah, I love that. little or no typographic hierarchy. I seem to get that a lot recently. And again, this is just basic design. But when the headings aren't that much different from the body text, and it's like, well, there's no visual scannability of that.
That's surprising.
I know.
What?
Twice recently that's
one thing that you would think a branding agency would do really well.
Absolutely, yes. So I don't know what that's all about.
Okay.
That twice that's happened to me recently. Restrictive layouts that can't accommodate real content. Yeah, no surprises there. No visual containers or component rules. So what I mean by that is when you're building the web stuff, web things, you often need to separate out components from one another. That there's this thing happening here and there's this thing happening there.
Yeah.
But the brand guidelines just presume everything is going to be floating nicely on a page with a grid system and nothing. There's no advice around containers, which often feels a weakness to me. Calls to action. Very little you get on calls to action in many brand guidelines, which is like, well, yeah, but they're incredibly important. So they have a primary colour that they use all over the place, and there's no colour to contrast it with for calls to action, for example.
Yeah.
And then guidelines that define specific dimensions. Yeah. Right, so you've got to leave this amount of space around the logo. 2 centimeters. What? What's that mean?
That's pretty rare, but it's still So what's the cost of all this? Well, obviously it damages accessibility that we've already talked about. And don't forget, accessibility doesn't just affect people with disabilities. It affects somebody standing outside with their mobile phone in bright glaring sunlight, or old codgers like Marcus who can't see properly anymore. That's true.
People like that. Yeah.
Well, although I had a poor accessibility experience with a link that was shared to me. Again, I'm not going to say by whom. That I checked out while I was on holiday in Italy, sat on the beach.
Yeah.
Waiting 30 seconds for a video to appear.
Oh yeah,
and that's got nothing to do with branding, but it's just like
that's really common. Yeah.
You use the example of designers with perfectly calibrated monitors. I've not had a good monitor, I think, ever. But my laptop's got one, but that sits slightly to the side. The one I'm looking at is an ancient Mac monitor. It's to ensure that those very subtle greys that our designers use.
Yeah.
I can tell them. I can say, look, I can't see it at all. And that kind of thing, but the same applies from a performance perspective. You've got to be really. We talk a lot about, and people with not great connections.
Poor connections, yeah.
But I actually experienced it, and it wasn't great.
The second one is comprehension. If there's a weak hierarchy, it can make pages harder to scan and to understand. The one that I care about the most, mine, is conversion. Calls to action receive less attention. I did this recently, where a design brand person said, oh, the button's got to be this colour or whatever. So I mocked it up in that colour, mocked it up in the colour that it should be, put it through one of these eye tracking studies, and that's losing you 3% on your conversion rate. Are we going to stick with the brand guidelines, or are we going to make money?
Did you say it exactly like that?
I said it exactly like that, yeah, because that's how unprofessional I am. Trust is another one when there's inconsistencies in brand guidelines, although oftentimes that's not the brand guidelines person's fault. That's, it's implementation further down the line.
Yeah.
I've wasted so much time in projects going backwards and forwards over branding that you think, well, that's just slowing delivery down, it's slowing, time to market down, and so it goes on, So it's a real pain in the arse. I mean, to give you go back into that example I mentioned a minute ago with that homepage and the calls to action. So I had a brand compliant version, which I tested against a more flexible version that I'd created using one of these AI attention tools. The revised design produced roughly 20% higher with clarity and focus, but the real killer was the call to action button that improved on the brand safe version by 80%. And it's like, I have never felt so smug in my life. It was a moment of absolute joy. Oh, I'm smug a lot, but I'm not saying I'm not regularly smug.
First
but
place
that one was a good
smugness.
One. Yeah.
One of the things you talk about, Paul, which we have learnt to we've had painful experiences of trying to do the sort of our part of the brand, our brand interpretation, the digital part, alongside or as part of or before the real brand or the traditional branding.
Yeah.
And it's never gone well.
No.
So I think, but to the point of now, we say if you're doing a brand project, note that if you hire us, we will interpret that brand, which will mean, doesn't necessarily, will likely mean changes. And examples would be fonts. We nearly always change the fonts that are selected by the original branding agency, and for the reasons that you've already said. And we might look at adding colours for highlighting calls to action, all the things that you've said. So we say that if you want to hire us, we will come in and probably make changes, but we want you to have signed off the original branding before we come in. Because if it just becomes this sort of no one's in charge and nobody really knows, because we're not in charge. If the previous, like the main branding project hasn't been finished, then we don't really have, our voice is not really listened to as enough. So we've learnt that, get that bit done, but also explain to the client that if you hire us, this is what we're going to do. So expect some changes related to all the things that we've been talking about on the show today. Yeah.
And it's that idea. I always come back to something that I learnt from, I can't remember his name, I think it was Neil something, in the National Trust, when we used to work with the National Trust back in the day.
Neil Eastell.
Wow, you've got a good memory.
Where did that come from?
He was responsible for brand identity at the National Trust, but he worded it this way: consistency, not uniformity. Right, and so he accepted that a brand needed to change within different environments, but it still needed to remain consistent. And I've taken that away, and I totally believe that. Right, that yes, you might have to change the font, but you wouldn't go from a serif to a sans serif. You wouldn't, you would try and match it, as closely as you could, while keeping download size down, which is the main reason you have to change a font a lot of the time, in my experience.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm coming round to a kind of digital first approach to branding, right? And other people might disagree with this, but this is
me.
how...
I've just disagreed with that.
Oh, do you disagree with this?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I suppose but that's no. That's what you said. Is if there is a branding agency that are doing their thing, let them finish doing their thing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And then we do it. So it's not first.
Yes,
then we do the digital stuff afterwards, post.
Yeah. And I can see that if that's the situation you're in, absolutely, I would take the same view as you over that, Marcus. But I would argue that in some ways there is an opportunity for a branding agency to step up here and say, we're going to start with the digital aspects. We're going to, because there's so much potential there. So, for example, you can start with personality and principles. You define what the organisation stands for, how it should feel, what you want people to feel about it, before you worry about hex values or anything like that. That's a normal part of the branding process.
Paul, you said they just pull it out of their arse earlier.
They do, but they first of all do ask some intelligent questions. Right, so I'll give them that one. Right, they do that. But
there's
then
not enough focus on the user, I think, is what you're saying here.
Yes.
Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But yeah, I think with some.
Yeah, with some. Then, but I think I would say you ought to bring in UX and design, digital specialists early. UX designers, accessibility people, content people. people with front end expertise, and these agencies that are doing branding really needs to be talking to these individuals. And again, there are some that are doing this, but not enough, in my opinion, to really understand the challenges there. And I do think in some situations, I can understand why you take the approach that you do, Marcus, because from a pure management perspective, I'm totally on board there. But in an ideal world, I do think a branding agency should be working in collaboration with a digital first agency, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't. I think in the notes I said I don't disagree, or this is how it should be. But I think the problem is you can, there are great branding agencies out there, but hardly any of them will do front end coding. I mean, some might, but they are dealing, even if they have knowledge when it comes to, they're not just thinking posters or presentations. They're thinking, mobile design and things like that, but they don't actually build this stuff. And that's why I think that we've taken this attitude of agree all the stuff you normally agree and then hand it over to us. I'm repeating myself here. Because we really know what we're talking about. And when the experiences we've had when we've tried to do it together, again, I'm repeating myself, it kind of lost its way a little bit. So that's just practical. I guess that's all it is.
Yeah, okay. I'll accept that. You've convinced me that, I do think, and that's fine as long as the brand being produced is recognised as a starting point for digital branding and not anything else. That's what it ultimately comes down to, doesn't it?
Yeah, you don't want to have dumb rules forced upon you. And we make sure that's not a thing.
So some questions that might be useful when you're beginning to look at branding is to think about how you're going to go about designing and working on the brand for screen at the very beginning, to not gloss over that and not treat that as a secondary situation. But if you're talking to a branding agency and you're thinking about hiring a branding agency, you really need to go in from the very beginning and say, look, this is primarily going to be seen on digital platforms. What's your experience here? When do you bring digital into the equation? That kind of stuff. I also think that there could do within the branding world being more focus put on the user, as you were saying a minute ago, Marcus.
I think that's a fair comment, definitely.
And so asking questions about how are you going to get user feedback on this, not just stakeholder feedback. What testing are you going to do of this brand to know whether it's working or not? Or is it just the highest paid person in the room picks their personal preference? Which happens most of the time in my experience. And when you start receiving assets back, put that logo on, what's that logo look like as a fave icon in a browser window? What does it look like if it's zoomed, if someone has zoomed their interface to 200% because they've got visual problems? What does it look in bright light? Actually taking time to look at that kind of thing. And which elements of the branding, you almost want to make a kind of 2-tier system in your brand guidelines of these things are absolutely set in stone, right? These things can't change, but these things can, and can be adapted across platforms and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then I think when it comes to the conversations around branding, it's kind of recognizing where that balance is between we don't want to open the can of worms of changing our brand and actually delivering something that's tangible, right? And is going to work for the environment. And recognizing that you don't always you're not going to be throwing out the whole design just by changing some stuff, Yeah,
if you're quick Headscape advert again, if you're hiring people who know what they're doing, then your brand will feel like your brand that you signed off before we even got involved. We're just extending it. There's no, well, we're going to change this and we're going to change that because, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not the case at all. It's just that there are so many different scenarios that aren't considered when it comes to
and I
almost,
I don't blame branding agencies for that particular. I know I went on a rant to begin with, but they're working within a fixed budget. They're having to look at the brand across all different platforms. They're not going to be able to dive as deep as a UI specialist. So I wanted to end by giving a little bit of advice to people that are maybe in the position of being responsible for digital assets and feeling constrained by the brand identity. The first piece of advice I want to give is don't demand a rebrand, right? You might as well, shoot yourself in the head. Nobody's going to listen to that. Or they'll probably pay a lot more attention if you shot yourself in the head, to be fair. But, it'll fall on deaf ears. You're not going to get anywhere. But find places where your current brand rules can be shown to be compromising or openly at war with basic usability, basic accessibility, and ideally conversion as well. That's always the big one. If you can show that this brand is losing you money by doing like that little AI test that I did. Oh, by the way, the tool I use for that is Attention Insight. I've mentioned it many times before, but I will mention it again. And then just ask to fix those high impact problems, and then if you hit pushback on that, which you will do sometimes, then you say, well, let's do a little test. Let's, do a branded version, a conservative brand version and a liberal brand version, and let's see which of those two performs best. Because brand isn't the holy relic that it seems to be positioned as. It's a tool for creating recognition, trust, and connection. And as long as it does that, it doesn't overly matter if it deviates slightly from what was originally written down. I feel like I've taken a very long time to say a very basic thing in this, which is that just be a bit more flexible over your bloody brand guidelines.
Yes.
So there you go.
But I think it's an important topic.
Yes.
So there.
So that's it. That's really all I wanted to say, that we need to get over ourselves. And I think we need to be braver as digital professionals to challenge brands a little bit more. Not in an aggressive way, not in a throw it out way, but let's see how much this is costing us in terms of usability, accessibility, and conversion. Marcus, do you have a joke for us?
I have a joke from Daryl Snow in the Bioag World Slack channel, and it's appropriate because
we haven't had one of him for ages. Cool.
And after this one, you may not want another one for a while. It's
that good, eh?
It's a wedding related joke or marriage related joke.
So there you go.
Which felt appropriate. When a TV and a can't say these words. When
Please
a TV,
keep that in.
I might do. When a TV antenna married another TV antenna, the service wasn't great, but the reception was amazing.
Yeah. That, I could see that one coming a mile off. But your cock up of the delivery made it all the more better.
All the more betterer. Okay.
All the more betterer.
Yes.
Neither of us can speak today. I just dried up mid-sentence earlier. You can't get... Although that was a particularly tongue-tying joke
I usually practice them because they're so short. Because you
do you practice them in the mirror?
No.
Alongside your affirmations. I am a good boy. I am a good boy.
Am I? I was actually going to say that earlier. I said I must have been through all sorts of, if you believe in this sort of thing, strife in previous lives, because I've had such a lovely time over the past couple of weeks. I must have earned it in some way.
Yeah. Either that or you were like some incredibly charitable person in a previous life or something like that.
Oh, yes, that's a lovely thought, Paul.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Okay, right, that wraps up this show. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember, go and check out my new new shiny tool because I'm very proud of it at toptasks.boagworld.com and have fun playing with it. Until next time, thank you for listening.